Yeah, I just want to thank you all for coming out here tonight. I want to thank Joe and the town for your help in setting up this arrangement, for David, Michael, and Ed for hosting this event. As Kevin said, this is the fourth of 8 forums we're doing around the state. We believe this is a critical issue. It's important that we be proactive, that we're being proactive on dealing with our transportation infrastructure system and not being reactive to a tragedy that happens. It's critical. This is a public safety issue. This is an economic development issue. This is a taxpayer issue. And this should not be a political issue. It should be bipartisan. This is a common sense issue. When the comptroller comes out with a report saying that our total bridges in the state of New York that are deficient totals about $75.4 billion, $27 billion, which is on our local infrastructure. That's a challenge. When 12.8% of our bridges on the local level are deficient, 9% at the state level are deficient, that's a problem that needs to be addressed. When TRIP did a study saying that 17% of our state roads were rated fair or poor or worse, getting in bad condition. It's the 10th worst in the country. It's 31% for our town roads. On the interstate system, the bridges, we have the 4th worst in the nation with deficiencies, 8% of our interstate bridges. This is a serious issue, but your input is critical to this issue, because what we're going to do is, after we finish up these forums, we're going to be putting together a report that we're going to be sharing with our colleagues, the governor. It's not about getting credit, it's about coming up with good ideas and good suggestions to make needed fixes and changes to our infrastructure, because again, this is a safety issue. This is about making sure, how many of us put our kids on a school bus every morning, or we know someone, or a first responder is getting to a critical emergency. This is a critical issue, and your input's invaluable to this situation, and we just want to thank you all for coming out and taking time to share your input with us. When we call you up, we would ask you to go to the table where the microphone is. It's not going to carry audio, but it helps with our sound people to be able to get what you're saying, so if you don't mind doing it. And we'll pass the microphone as you call. Introduce yourselves as we call you up, too. So thank you again for coming out here tonight, and we'll call you up here momentarily.
I just want to say thank you. It is great to see my former colleagues. You're all doing well, making such a difference. I knew Phil Palmisano when he first entered the State Assembly, and he didn't have a single gray hair in his beard. It's thank you, Phil. You've done an incredible job in so many ways for the conference and helped out statewide, a true leader. And it's such a pleasure to have you here on Long Island in the town of Oyster Bay. The newest member, Kevin, we served for a very short time together, but I hear nothing but great things about your energy, your forward thinking, and your activism on behalf of your district, on behalf of the conference, and on behalf of the state. And when it comes to the Long Island members, these assembly members, there's just nobody better than them. What a privilege to serve with David McDonough, who has been on the Transportation Committee for many, many years now, for Michael Montesano, who continues to make a big, big difference with a tremendous breadth of experience in law enforcement, in the business sector, in government, and with the Assembly, and with Ed Ra, who, when he first started, they said, could you please ask that intern not to sit in the member's seat, thinking that he was a staff member, and you've blossomed now, leading the debate on the floor. Long Island took a heavy hit when we lost our chairman of the Senate Transportation Committee in Chuck Fischillo. But to see all of you advocating, clearly those shoes have been filled. The town of Oyster Bay, among all of our municipalities, has work that we need done, and we need you to shake the tree for us. You know that. You are fully capable, and we're quite lucky to have you at the helm in the state, looking out for us, ensuring we get our fair share to protect our roads, whether it's CHIPS money, infrastructure repairs, and we certainly could use that help in the town of Oyster Bay. I hope you'll continue to remember us. And one more shout out, a former state assembly member who continues to be the czar of projects on Long Island. He continues with his very effective advocacy in the state for Long Island, clearly, and for there is not a major project that doesn't get done that Mark Herbst hasn't been a part of. Mark, it's a tremendous pleasure to have you here, former town of Oyster Bay employee, former state assemblyman, and now as the executive director of Long Island Contractors Association. Your effectiveness is felt each and every day, and we appreciate your advocacy, especially those projects in the town of Oyster Bay.
How you doing? Good evening. My name's Richard Lenz. I'm Commissioner of Department of Public Works and Highways for Town of Oyster Bay. I really appreciate you people coming down from Albany. I know how important this is to everybody. Town of Oyster Bay has 730 lane miles of roadway. Of that, quite a bit of it is in pretty poor shape. The supervisor and I came in around the same time. Of that, what we did when we came in, the supervisor and I, we had the road, we rated all the roads in the town of Oyster Bay. We rated them with a DOT specification that rates us from 1 to 10, 10 being the best, 1 being the worst. Of that, we have 93 miles that we need to repair that are in kind of poor shape. So any help and assistance that we can get from the state would help our residents in this area. You had mentioned before about bridges. We really don't have bridges in the town of Oyster Bay that are our responsibility. We have only one down on the South Shore. The rest are county, state, or well, county or state. We have done, we've repaired in the, this year alone, over 15 miles worth of roads in this year term. And we're planning on doing as much as we can next year. We already have a plan in place for working on it next year. So now is the time to take care of these, the budget issues for us. I just wanted to mention, as I said, there was 730 miles of centerline roads, but that equates to 1,400 lane miles. So you could see it multiplies, you know what I mean? So, because there's 2 and 3 lane, 4 lane highway, roads. So it is pretty daunting, the amount of work that needs to be done. So we would really appreciate the budget help that we could, anything we could receive, yes.
Mr. Lenz, just let me ask you, if you could tell us roughly, what's the cost per mile to the town for road work?
Okay, that's a very good question. If you're doing a complete road rehabilitation, it's about $1.3 million per mile. If we're going what we call mill and overlay, what we're doing is that means that the base road has to be in fairly good shape, and that's what we're finding, that it is in good shape. We are milling and overlaying a lot of those roads, and when we say milling, we're putting about 2 to 2.5 inches worth of asphalt on top. We mill it, grind it up, that's all cleaned up, and then we put a new 2.5 to 3 inches worth of asphalt on top of that, and that'll give us the new crown that we need again, and it'll also give us the flow lines to, and that ranges from anywhere from $300,000 to $500,000 per lane mile.
Thank you.
What percentage of those roads require complete replacement of that 1,400?
Of the 1,400, there's about 50 miles that need to be replaced. We are doing, in concurrent with what I just described to you, we are doing full road rehabilitations. We've done them, we just completed one. We're in the process of bidding others, several other roads that we are going to, road projects that we're going to do. So we're bidding some projects, we're doing road restoration on other projects, and we also have our highway staff. This is the first year that we've been able to do this also. We bought our own equipment to do some of our own patching work. This way it allows us to patch a big area and be able to take care of our residents that way, because these last winters have been horrendous for us in potholes. So by not just filling in a small pothole, we cut it out and then we repair it to regular specifications. It's not pretty, because it's a patchwork, but it's more functioning than any other road that we can do. And then as we get into the program, then we'll come back and take care of those roads.
But you say about what percent, 10% of them maybe require you to replace the whole thing?
Yes, about 10%, yes.
Right down to the bottom, right?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, and that's very
We're
expensive.
finding, it varies in location. It's not one specific location. It varies. Sometimes what we find on the North Shore, we have areas that have a lot of clay, and that's where we're having base failure. In central town of Oyster Bay, we're having crown issues where it appears to us that the crown was never formed properly, meaning the top of the road, as you know, that was never formed properly, so it's not draining properly, so that has to be redone. Other areas, we have to add additional drainage. We have talked to the county on some issues that we interface with our roads going to county roads, and they are going to work with us on some of our roads also, which is a big help.
A lot of times, a lot of our focus, we've seen in a lot of these forums, has been on local infrastructure, so obviously you being here and Joe being here puts another face on that. We have programs like the CHIPS program, and we created Pave New York, and programs like Extreme Winter Recovery are money that goes right to the local communities to help you. A couple questions in regard to that. One of the issues that have come up in some places is that sometimes the criteria for CHIPS, having to have a certain useful life, that in some areas it might be helpful to some communities, maybe, for like a crack sealant that might not qualify for a CHIPS, but it could still be a certain improvement to a local community. Do you think it would be wise to look at, and I don't know if that impacts you as much, so I know in Suffolk County, we were talking to Dan LaSquadra, he said maybe not for his town, but for other towns, for your town or for other towns, to give it a little bit more flexibility on the CHIPS funding as far as allowing you to use that money for what you need would be a helpful thing and a wise thing to do from the state's perspective?
Absolutely, it would really be a helpful. We do apply for CHIPS every year, and we are very successful in getting CHIPS money, and that's usually where we do the larger drainage program, where we're replacing drainage, base failure, and we're also doing the top, the asphalt. That is really a big boost to the town of Oyster Bay and to the supervisor and councilman to be able to do that. And as I say, we do it on an annual basis. As anything, I wish we could get a little more. We understand, but I'm just saying that's our basis for doing a lot of the bigger projects with that CHIPS money.
Many of us would like to see all that just rolled into the CHIPS formula because it's predictable, where Pave New York goes away soon, and winter recovery is a year-to-year thing, and the governor can remove it for his budget and say he's not cutting local funding when he is. But relative to that issue, do you see there's a, well, I want to get to, you mentioned you didn't have many bridges. What about culverts? So you have culverts that you're responsible for?
Absolutely. Yes, we have quite a few. Most of our culverts go into storm basins. We have some culverts that go out especially on the South Shore and on the North Shore, that go into the harbor on the North Shore, Oyster Bay Harbor, and then we also have culverts that go to canals in Massapequa area and things like that.
In regards to that, because one of the other programs out there is called Bridge New York, and we worked to try to get culvert funding included in that. One of the complaints we've heard from some of our areas, especially upstate rural areas, is that the application process has become a little bit more complicated, where when they started it was like a one-page form. Now it's like a 7-page form. It's a little bit more complicated. Do you see easing the burden on the paperwork would be easier, and then trying to expand that opportunity for more culvert funding in that program? Would that be helpful?
Absolutely, yes, I do. We, in the town of Oyster Bay, we actually have to have somebody that actually fills out all the forms, because there's so many forms that need to be filled out for grant funding that that's their purpose is to apply for grants for us. So that's really, so the easier you can make it for us, the best it would be for us.
One more point on that topic. One of the subjects that have come along is because everyone likes the CHIPS program because this money goes right to the local community. You decide what to fix with the money you receive. and this could be, anyone who's talked, when they come up and talk, certainly feel free to answer in this area too. But with the CHIPS program, some of the conversations come up relative to bridge or culverts or bridges to create like a CHIPS-like formula so they can allocate money to municipalities for the culverts they have. You think something like that would be welcomed by municipalities like yourself if we were able to create something like that? And then the other end of that spectrum is another part of our infrastructure that we talk about a lot, but maybe sometimes gets overlooked, is water and sewer infrastructure. I know there's legislation involved to create a CHIPS-like formula for water and sewer infrastructure. Is that something you think that would be looked upon favorably by communities here throughout Nassau County?
Definitely. In the town of Oyster Bay, the sewers is managed by Nassau County, but that's still something that needs to be done. Also, the water, we have different water districts, but that still would be very helpful. CHIPS, in many cases, a lot of our grants, you have to lay the money out first, do all the work, and then get the money later. That sometimes is a little burdensome. Not that we're having a problem with it. I'm just saying if there was some way to work with us, maybe quarterly or something like that, that might help some of the budgets too.
As far as the time frame?
The time frame, yes. So once we establish a project, we say that it's, and then as the construction is going on, if we can get reimbursement on a quarterly basis or a semi-annual, that would help us.
Okay.
Just let me come back to you for 1 second with an issue up in Glen Head, which is part of my district. So I know in the past you've had to use portable pumps to drain the flood areas up in Glen Head. What help would the town need from the state to help remediate this condition on a permanent basis?
One of our problems in this Glen Head area that you're talking about is the water is rushing down on a county road, and ours is the low spot. So we talked to the county about a month or two ago, and they are going to work with us, and that's what I mentioned earlier, is that the county is working with us. They're going to work with us and trying to put some more drainage on their main street so that then it would allow our street to drain off. Right now, what we do is any rain like today, we have to pump it to the next street over. So when we know a rainstorm event like this is coming, we then have to install pumps, because these are huge pumps, and piping, because we don't want to leave them. It's a residential area. So we have to go up there, install them, pump to the next street to drain everything. So if we could impress on the county how important this is to work with us, that would be very beneficial.
So if they make that change, that'll help eliminate the way that water flows. But financially, what's the impact on the town to remedy this situation? Is there grants involved? Is there?
Yes. Well, as far as we know, there is no grant right now, so we would like to apply for that. The town of Oyster Bay has already put in several drainage manholes on our residential street, but it's still not enough to take all the water that's coming.
So if you had to make an educated guess, what do you think the cost impact would be for you to remedy the situation permanently, for the ideal performance?
Sure. It's several $1 million, 2 to 3. Yes. I want to thank everybody again for listening to us and trying to help us. I think this is an excellent forum to assist us, and I hope in the future that we can continue the dialogue. Thank you.
Good evening, gentlemen, members of the Assembly. I appreciate the opportunity to testify before you. As you know, I have submitted written testimony, and I know you are all very educated and you know how to read, so I will just paraphrase and go through this quickly and be happy to answer any questions. Let me begin by saying that I'm the Executive Director of the Long Island Contractors Association. We represent the heavy construction industry here on Long Island. We have about 170 member firms that are responsible for most of the infrastructure construction that takes place, which includes our roads, bridges, transit systems, utilities, and what have you. If it's going out for public bid, most likely it's one of our member companies that are doing the work. We are partners with the public sector, and we work with all our governments very closely, and it is a good relationship, and we are quite proud of the fact that most of our companies are family-owned businesses here on Long Island, and we employ mostly all Long Islanders from the union workforce. So we are proud of the work that we do. We're proud to represent this community. My comments tonight will be specifically for Long Island to give you the perspective of where we come from. And before I do that, I just remind you of what we encountered as we came here today, the torrential rainstorms that we walked through to get into this building. It is the remnants of a terrible hurricane, Hurricane Michael, that hit the Florida coastline. And it's reminiscent of what we experienced here on Long Island 6 years ago with Superstorm Sandy. And many of our communities are still recovering from that terrible situation and the disasters that have happened. And I think it's a reminder, and the hearing that you have here today is something that we should focus upon when we talk about critical infrastructure. It also is the sustainability of the systems that we have. Immediately following Superstorm Sandy and other storms and disasters that hit New York State, the governor came out and created a new program that was called Rising New York. And that was a program that looked throughout the states about how we can increase sustainability. Here in this region, they formed 22 different community task forces to look at where they were severely hit and what the problems were. And the task force were put together of professionals and community leaders to identify what the needs of the communities were. And they created these 22 community programs with recommendations that were supported by engineering firms that came up with wonderful proposals. Our concern, and we ask that you look at these studies, the 22 reports that were formulated and submitted, we are urging you to make sure they do not remain on a shelf. And the recommendations that were made, many of them sufficient to protect this region as well as others throughout the state, we ask that you look at those and request that the administration, from the administration, that what the status of those reports are, and to make sure that the funding that they were to secure from the federal level is indeed sought after by our municipal governments and other agencies to make sure that the work and the protection of this region is in place. And I don't have to tell you, the purpose of this hearing is also to prepare yourselves for the upcoming capital program. You know that we are entering next year the final phase of the last adopted 5-year program, which was very helpful throughout the state. Before that 5-year program was many years before a long-term plan was adopted by the state. I congratulate you and thank you for doing that. So we are now poised to look at where are we going in the future and some of the things that we need to address. So beginning this work, I think it's important for you to identify not only the needs, the dollar amounts, but the specific projects that are needed that need the funding. And some of those things are very important for us. As we look at this region on Long Island, I want to bring to your attention, in addition to the sustainability issues, the infrastructure for the transportation system on Long Island is quite unique, and the issues that face us are quite different. I show you the diagram from the map that was placed by the New York State Department of Transportation that shows you the traffic in the region. The downstate region, particularly Long Island, is the most congested region in the state. And that is contributed partly by the amount of registered vehicles. Over 20% of the registered vehicles in New York State are located in Nassau and Suffolk County. If we look at the geographic Long Island region and you add Queens and Kings County, you now have more than 32% of the registered vehicles traveling in this region. This is home, this is where they travel. So the demand that we have on the infrastructure system is greater here than anywhere in the rest of the state. On top of that, because of the region, the climate that we have here, we are faced with weather conditions, particularly during the winter, where we have significant ice situations. In the upstate region, they are known, and And I don't have to tell you, Phil, about the snow in your region, but it snows, it stays there, and if June finally comes along, it may melt. Down here, it's a constant mix. We have to deal with a freeze-thaw throughout, which does a damaging condition to the roadways. Constantly, the expansion and the retraction of the ice damages the road much more quickly. So we've got the congestion and we've got the weather conditions that damage our roads. So that's something that we face in this region. The other infrastructure systems that we're concerned about, if we take a step away from the highway, is to look at what our natural resources are in this region. And we have been looking and dealing with very dangerous attacks on our environment. The supervisor has been a leader in this issue for the region, and the environment is our concern as well. We've faced something recently with outrageous, dangerous nitrogen levels in our water supplies. And we've had harmful algae blooms, fish kills, and diminishing aquatic life and animal life in our region. How do you change that? We have to invest more in sewers, enhancing our sewer systems, and installing more septic systems. 70% of Suffolk County does not have sewers right now. The system in Nassau County was put in the 70s. Some areas, such as I believe outside of the Glen Head area, Locust Valley area, do not have sewers. They must be installed. So to sum up, LICA has a 10-project priority that we will share with you and give to you to look at some of the issues and some of the concerns that we think need to be addressed. So when you go through the budget situation, I will highlight them quickly just to let you know what they are. These are in no particular order. The first one has been a priority for us. New York Route 347 is a 15-mile corridor. There was funding. The project, only 4 miles of the 15-mile corridor have been completed. It stopped. Construction halted in December, and there's no money left to continue. And that is a vital corridor for this region, and that needs to be funded, and the work needs to be resumed. Other congestion problem, Oakdale Merge, Route 27, Sunrise Highway in Oakdale, of course. That is the greatest congestion point in the region. We have 16 lanes that collapse within 1 mile down to 6 lanes, where this Southern State Parkway ends and all funnels in, and Montauk Highway. There has to be an engineering solution. People are constantly sitting in traffic there. We want to see that fixed. Back to the environment, the Bay Park sewage outfall pipe has been discussed, and the money issues to repair those damages that have taken place from Superstorm Sandy and the needs to enhance and protect the bays in that area. We have major developments, the Ronkonkoma Hub. Finally, we have approval in Suffolk County to do sewer improvements there. Additional funds are necessary for economic development for the businesses and the residents in that area so we complete that program for the environment. Further sewer projects in Nassau County here, the 2 major sewer plants, Bay Park and Cedar Creek. There is a proposal. Nassau County has put out a RFP for engineering firms to look and design a connection door along Sunrise Highway for an abandoned system that's below the waterways that will make the system, the overall county process, work better, and we hope that we can find the dollars for that. There's development, and you've read in the news about the Heartland out in Suffolk County, and alongside that is the Sac de Coast Parkway. It is only 2 lanes in each direction. The traffic congestion there is undesirable. And what has happened there is, because of opposition to Heartland, the need to make the necessary improvements to the Sac de Coast has been delayed and put off to find out what happens with that development. Meanwhile, the traffic stays there, and we want to see that addressed, and we suggest you look at that as well. The Northern State Parkway, as you know, the congestion has been a problem there. Back in 1998, they expanded it to 3 lanes in each direction to the Wantagh Parkway. And that needs to be expanded, and we suggest you look at funding to continue that expansion to 3 lanes, possibly through to Route 110 or even further. Here in Nassau, the Meadowbrook Parkway and the Southern Parkway interchange is a major bottleneck point as well, and a dangerous situation. We suggest that improvements be made there. They were originally proposed as part of the project at the Nassau hub when they were talking about the lighthouse. As we know, that hasn't happened. A new proposal is there for the Nassau hub. We think that any development that is improved there or proposed should include other improvements for the Sunrise, for Southern State and the Meadowbrook Parkway. I also want to bring to your attention in Suffolk County, there is a proposal for 4 new sewer districts. The Suffolk legislature is asked for, they're scheduling a public hearing to have a voter referendum, and that will be coming hopefully in January of next year, and we hope to have support to have 7,000 people put on, have the opportunity to have sewers that no longer, or at this point, don't. And finally, I will just mention the world's longest parking lot, which is also, as we all know, the Long Island Expressway. We have the dubious honor of being one of the worst choke points at, I believe this is in your districts, Mr. Montesano, the Shelter Rock Road, or is that further west of you? So you can't take blame for that, but you can improve it. And so that is rated as the number 90th worst spots in all of the country for the traffic congestion there. We think we should fix it, along with other choke points.
I have just a quick question. With the Heartland project, I saw that his proposal to be connected into the Suffolk County sewer system was denied. Is there any feasibility for them to have an on-site sewage plant and system, self-contained for a development that large?
That is a possibility. Yes, it is.
I know you talked about, the 5-year capital plan and laying out specific projects, and one of the things that has been a focus of our conference and has certainly been a highlight of these forums so far is the need for local infrastructure. We have programs like the CHIPS program, Pave New York, and Extreme Winter Recovery. When you total the 3 of them, it's about $600 million. Really quite a drop in the bucket from my perspective. When we look at the context of a $27 billion 5-year capital plan that we're under right now for DOT, would you recommend in a plan like that, being more specific when it comes to the CHIPS funding, rolling that all into just the CHIPS formula, because then it's recurrent, and maybe putting in a 5-year plan of increases at the local level? You think something like that would be helpful to lay that out specifically in a 5-year capital plan? That way it gives a little bit certainty and predictability to your local municipalities and the property taxpayers?
Well, there's two things I'd like to say about that. First of all, the state has changed, the DOT program has changed where they now budget on system and off system. In the past, they would give you a number. That number was on system, which meant the state DOT system. They would fund that. Now they take money and call it off system, which goes to the municipalities, which is fine, but the number all of a sudden becomes lower. Now, when they have the off system, what they do is they require certain requirements to build according to the state specs, which is fine. The issue that we have here is a lot of the municipalities, particularly the villages, don't have the capability to meet those standards, or they don't have the engineering behind. So what do? They don't take the money, or it causes a greater delay. As a solution to that, what we now do, and what I believe you're advocating, is for the CHIPS program, where the funding would go straight to the municipalities, and they would do their own program according to their own specifications. That is a faster, more expedient way to do business. And we are supportive of increasing the CHIPS program in that way.
Okay. Relative to the water and sewer issue that you mentioned, I know the budget created a $2.5 billion to water infrastructure program. But the idea has also come up, and I mentioned earlier, about creating almost a similar CHIPS-like formula for municipalities to give them a little bit of money on an annual basis so they can use in their budget. Do you think something like that would be helpful, or do you think creating a bigger program like they have this $2.5 billion to kind of dole out, because obviously those projects are expensive, or should it be a combination of both?
That figure sounds like a lot, but when you go statewide, it really isn't. The needs for the clean water on Long Island are above that figure that's being spent statewide. So it essentially is a drop in the bucket. When that proposal came forward last session, of course, we supported anything but the dollar amounts. We would have preferred some type of public referendum on clean water that would have met all the needs. We have water systems here on Long Island that are over 100 years old. They're aging, they're collapsing, and a lot of the problems that we now have is with the tax cap. The water districts have to go to the municipalities for the approval of the bonding. Now, if a municipality is suffering, The bond rating is lower, and now they have the cap on top of it, so the water districts are having difficulty even ascertaining or acquiring to reach that money to make the repairs that need to be done. So it's really a difficult situation. So we think the overall need, and if the public was given the opportunity to vote on protecting the environment, we believe that would be successful.
That was a point I wanted to bring up to you, and I think you just touched on it. You think we've had environmental bond acts, we've had transportation bond acts. Do you think, obviously that's something that takes voter approval, and you think you would recommend maybe as we look toward a 5-year capital plan for transportation or the water and sewer challenges we have, we should look at either a combined bond act or 2 separate bond acts for those types of things to give the voters a chance to weigh in that? Do you think that's something that we should be looking to recommend in the future? Because
We wholeheartedly do. And the last successful bond act for transportation, again, when you're asking the voter to vote yes or no on something, they want to know where their money's going. And what they did that time is they identified specific projects. We've given you a list here for this region. We can do that statewide with our sister organizations, our trade associations. We advocated together as a coalition, and we'd be happy to do that again. I think the public knows the needs of the infrastructure and the environmental needs that we have, and they would be supportive. If a plan is there and they know where the money is going. They're not going to vote for a large pot of money if they don't see the results that are going to be in their communities to address their personal needs.
2 more questions, and I don't want to hog here. I apologize, guys. One of the challenges we have is with the money revenues. We collect about, or I think somewhere near about $4.7 billion annually in driver-related fees, if you take the sales tax and the DMV fees, but only about $2 billion of that's going to dedicated infrastructure. Even for let's take the sales tax on gasoline, we collect about $1 billion, $520 million of it for the state, $520 million for locals. But that money doesn't go to infrastructure. It goes into the general fund and goes to pay revenue bonds. And then we have the dedicated bridge and trust fund that some money goes into it, but not all of it goes into it. The rest goes into general fund. Are you supportive of us trying to make sure those dollars that are supposed to be going to the dedicated bridge and trust fund for infrastructure are used for that instead of being used for like DMV and DOT operations? Do we have it go specifically for infrastructure?
We believe it should all go for capital programs. The problem that we had and the frustration is we were all excited when they created a lockbox for transportation, but basically what they did is they gave everybody a key to the lockbox, so the money just went elsewhere and didn't stay where it was supposed to be. You've got to plow the streets, that's not a capital improvement. You've got to pay your, government employees, that's not a capital improvement. That's where those funds are going. And now it's all for bonding. It was supposed to be self-sustaining. And it's not your issue, but on the federal level, the federal gas tax, the trust fund there is nearly deplete too. That has to be addressed on the federal level. And on the state, for the funding for the state, we were all anticipating that there'd be a great transportation program because the last 2 presidential candidates, both sides, said that would be a priority. And we've seen nothing come forward that's going to help the states or the localities at this point.
I just wanted to bring up one of the priority projects, the Nassau hub. And obviously, we're at a time when, once again, there's excitement that there's going to be development there. I think we're in a different place than maybe we've been in past iterations of this because it sounds like it's going to fit within the zoning that the town of Hempstead had put forth. But how, specific to what the specifics of that project are, is the infrastructure needs in the immediate area with the parkways and with Hempstead Turnpike? Is it generally just those capacity issues, regardless of whether it's the what type of uses are there? And I know we've always had conversation about whether there's going to be some type of rapid transit to one of the local train stations. So how much does the specifics of this project play into that?
I think what I have involved with the program is the rapid transit program, a light rail system, as serious discussions have taken place there. The surrounding, there's going to have to be a lot of utility movements within the site itself and the actual infrastructure, the parking garages that EDC will actually fund. That type of infrastructure will take place on the site. The congestion issues, originally, they were looking at Hempstead Turnpike, some improvements along that corridor, as well as Southern State and the Meadowbrook Parkway. And so those are the things that were looked at in the past. DOT has preliminary drawings of some of the proposals and the places where they were looking when this was first looked at. So most of those would have to be dusted off and looked at and met to the anticipated travel demand that they expect to come from that. But as we know right now, though, there are congestion problems at the Meadowbrook and Southern Parkway.
Mark, just to follow up on one thing that Phil mentioned a little bit back, the $520 million that the state gets through the sales tax on gasoline. It just struck me when you said close to, or maybe more than 20% of the registered motor vehicles in the state of New York come from, that's Suffolk and Nassau combined? Yes. And then it gets up to over 30% when you add in Kings and Queens County. So I'm sure they're paying a very significant portion of those sales tax dollars too. So I found that interesting. I wanted to highlight that, make sure I got those numbers right. And then my one question really was about, I know you highlighted a lot of Long Island projects. Are there any, there's obviously the financial piece to this, but are there any requirements on the state level from the bidding or procurement process that slows things down, that delayed these projects from moving forward, that maybe we could try to take a better look at to prevent more delays?
Well, I have to commend the Department of Transportation. They do a very good job of processing paperwork and payments. And so there's no issue with us as far as the business side of things. As far as taking a project from design to actually putting it out to bid, that sometimes can take long. And they've looked at new systems, design-build programs. In many cases, that has been very successful, and I think that's being implemented more and more throughout the state to move things faster. That's a good program. Some of our frustrations right now deal with the MWBE program. The goals are now being increased to over 30% on some projects. That is laudable, the goal. However, when the inventory is not there, we think that there has to be a change, and the onus is placed on the contractor rather than the state. So there's a lot of issues there where we can't help a minority or a woman-owned business if they've got difficulty. If they can't receive something, and then all of a sudden the contractor is still required to make the payments if they default. And we think the liability, some of those issues should be taken care of. And one thing that we've suggested is that if you want to increase the goals and really enhance things, you should look at the contracts and don't put the goal on the overall project, because projects are very different. So why don't you put on whatever you sub? If you want to take, if I'm going to bid a project to pave a road, and I'm going to sub out a portion of that, why don't you say a portion of that, the percentage should be increased, say 50% must go to a minority-owned company, because that'll lower the cost. If I have a truck and I do paving, that's the work that I do. What can I contract out? What can I sub out? Well, now I've got to hire somebody to do the work that I already can do, that I can do cheaper, since it's my own equipment, my own. So that's one of the issues. So the MWBE issues are a concern that we're working with. Long answer.
Yeah, no, that's something that we've heard about in other parts of the state, not specific to that, but with MWBEs. One of our colleagues, Cliff Crouch, has legislation that would make MWBE requirements mirror more of the actual MWBE certified companies in the area, because there's a bit of a mismatch, and sometimes we've heard some stories, I think Phil can say, that they've had to hire someone from out of the state to meet certain requirements. So that was just, I was curious if that was something that you could speak to. Thank you. You definitely answered my question.
On Long Island, we have several levels of government, too many, in fact. But for instance, in Nassau County or Suffolk County, we have state government, or federal government, then state government, then county government, and then town governments. And it goes all the way down. Then we've got tons of incorporated villages. So when you stop and think about the number of governments, like the cars on Long Island that he talks about, we've got enough to build a whole new state someplace. And in that vein, I'd like to call on Ralph Swazi.
One more quick question for you, Mark, I'm sorry. I know we talked about a bond act and what the need is out there. Based on what the need is out there, I mean, whether it's water and sewer or transportation, I mean, we mentioned $75 billion just in bridges. And I think some of the studies I've seen on water and sewer, you could probably be up to where $100 billion. based on the need, what do you think would be a proposal that could go to the voters that would be acceptable, or that I mean, from talking to your fellow people in your industry, based on what the need is out there, what would be a legitimate or a feasible bond act to take to the voters to consider, whether it's transportation or water and sewer or both?
Well, it depends on how long of a period you're looking for. I believe the last one, it was a 5-year bond act. So right now, the state spends about $1.8 billion a year on the transportation capital program. But that's not the needs, but that's what the existing program is. So if you wanted to double that, just, I'm throwing that off without looking at specific projects and needs. So to give you an idea what the funding is at this time.
Ralph Swarzy is the village administrator from the village of Garden City.
But I want to thank you, first of all, for coming here and inviting us, and I appreciate the invitation. Assemblyman Montesano covers the area where I live, and Assemblyman Roth covers the area where I work. I only work for places that start with GC. As the former mayor of Glen Cove from 2006 to 2013, and the current village administrator for almost 5 years now in Garden City, I know a lot about infrastructure. In fact, I met Mark Herbst, who did a fantastic job talking about the regional needs here. It's a tough guy to follow, but I just want to, I think I'm here just to support all the people in my position, whether they be town leaders, village leaders, city officials. The needs are the same, the scale is just different. Our business is mostly to build and bury. People don't even see it. They don't even recognize where their tax dollars go often. Even in Garden City, I'm dealing with 80, 100-year-old water mains, clay sewer pipes, the water infrastructure and the sewer infrastructure alone. I can't imagine what it's like all over the state and on Long Island. The roads, $1 million miles to build a new road, $1.3 million to build a new road. But it's not just the asphalt and the base material, it's on the New York State law, you have to deal with the pedestrian concrete byways around it, the aprons, the curbs, and the sidewalks. And that cost really adds up quickly. And you add prevailing wage on top of that. So the need is great. And I just, we both in my former life in Glen Cove and now, we take advantage of the CHIPS funding. Thank you. It supplements and adds to what we can do. I do a 5-year capital plan. We're actually thinking now of looking at a 10-year capital plan because the thinking has to go out that far, the planning, the funding, the bonds. So, 5-year capital plan, maybe the state could look at longer periods too, so it's funded over a long period of time, because it's not really a finite thing that lives and dies in 1 year. These are bread and butter issues for the small villages, the cities, the towns. And I also know, because I came from Glen Cove where I had deficits to an area where I now have surpluses, not every town or community has the same resources. I happen to have an engineering staff in my current community, but I didn't have one. I had to buy engineering services in the past, so the cost of building can change based on those things. So I also often wondered if and I've also dealt with both federal and state funds, and I know that Mark pointed out that, and I support giving money to local jurisdictions and let them build their own specifications, because there's not only so many ways you can build a road. 2.5 inches of asphalt on the top of 3. Maybe set up thresholds, bottom and top thresholds, because I've built walkways for pedestrians that you could land a 747 on it because it was federal funding and they had certain specifications. It's a waste of money to impose that, and it's good taxpayer money being wasted where it could be stretched out to do more. So, I'm just here to support the general need. I live in Long Island. I was born in Long Island. I work in Long Island. But even when I leave and I drive other parts of the country, infrastructure is everything. It's the biggest thing that we spend money on outside of our operations, and it takes a lot more time than the operations, the planning and the execution of it. So, any help from the state is welcome. I appreciate what you do today. Thank you for letting me speak, gentlemen.
Well, you mentioned that you've got some roadways that could sustain a 747 landing there. Please don't get that word to Washington, okay? Because it'll show up right on 7th Street or something.
There's a walkway, this is the Glen Cove.
Right, okay, okay. Thank you very much, Ralph.
I got a couple
sorry.
quick questions for you. What you mentioned earlier about having to meet those federal guidelines, especially when it comes to ADA requirements, that people, there were some places we heard where the money they wanted to spend on the road, it cost them more just to make their curb cuts, and things of that nature would cause cause their expenses to go up on a project of that nature. Just lost my train of thought, what I wanted to ask you. Relative to, I hate when I lose my train of thought.
Federal funding?
Relative to federal funding that you mentioned, because I talked to a county highway superintendent in my area, when you get a federal bridge project, it's 80% federal, I think 15% state and 5% local. But he said the amount of money that he could, him and his crew could design a bridge that's just as safe, but these federal guidelines put all these requirements on it, make the bridge cost probably about, 30%, 40, 50% more than what it could do if they just could put their own specs together. Do you see that type of similar?
Those references were to my life in Glen Cove, where I had a community with many Superfund sites. I had a lot of federal grants coming in. I had state money. We had earmarks coming in. And we had so many different projects going on. But one in particular was a pedestrian walkway from point A to point B alongside a pond. And we split it so we could have a nice, gentle walk by the water, and people wanted to get from point A to point B quickly. We gave them a separate sidewalk. That asphalt path with the concrete boundaries, the contractor told me, this thing is so well-built I could land a plane on it. And I remember those words because I realized that it was being overbuilt to a specification, because they give you the money to build it, they don't want to spend money maintaining it, so they really super build it. It's like supersizing it. And I don't find it so much with the state, but relating back to what Mark said, if the DOT standards slow down, impact the cost and the time need to build a project, which most local officials, DPW officials, engineering teams know how to build. They're building the same roads you're on. And I also don't think the regional needs that Mark talked about and the incorporated village needs I represent today and the city needs I represented in my past, they're not mutually exclusive, because we're all connected. And communities have state and county roads coming through them a lot of times. So, you can't just live in isolation, right? So finding a way to fund all of us is important. CHIPS is one way. The other thing is, I always thought that it might be nice if there were low-interest loans available, especially for communities that don't have the fiscal strength of others. Because the bond markets can be very punitive to people who find themselves in dire situations financially. So if there could be, through the state, maybe preferred banks to give low-interest loans of a certain percentage to all communities that are in greater need from a bond rating standpoint. Maybe not the bottom, but a way to fund these jobs, because their needs are great too. And when you delay jobs, a road that costs $250,000 today, if you wait too long, it's going to cost you $500,000 tomorrow. It's $750,000. So delaying it doesn't save you money; it costs you more in the end.
Just in terms of the water infrastructure needs that you talked about, and obviously this has been the focus the last couple of state budgets with money that we know is a drop in the bucket, as Mark had said. Has the village been able to take advantage of any of that coming from the state, or what would make it easier for the village to take advantage of some funding when it comes to water infrastructure?
We don't have a grant writer per se. We do deal with NYSERDA for power, LED lights. We deal with the CHIPS fund for roads. I don't think we have any water grants coming through, and we really don't have anyone looking at them. But that's education might be helpful there. We're so busy. It's like running a government is like changing a tire on a moving car. You really can't stop it and take the time to do it. So if there's anything you know of that you can funnel our way, we'll certainly look into it. I just know that the need is tremendous, and water itself, the piping. I mean, there's what's underground today might not necessarily be what you want. You have transite pipe, which has asbestos in it. While it might not be dangerous in its normal form, it's stuff you want to replace down the road. It's just the linear footage and the cost of excavation. And then you, like I said, add on prevailing wage. It's a tremendous amount of cost for small villages and communities to do. And even the towns, even though they're bigger, they have more to deal with anyway. So it's probably, it's probably the same percentage of cost to them per capita. When I was mayor of Glen Cove, Mark's organization, LICA, actually recognized me for doing more capital projects per capita 1 year than anyone else on Long Island. I get the capital thing. To me, it's not something that needs to be put off, and I've seen too much of it delayed. So anything that can be done on the state level to help the governments would be appreciated.
I want to thank everyone for being here today. I was asked by my superintendent to come down to see what all this was about. I'm responsible for transporting 5,400 students on a daily basis, and we all know that, the roads are very important for, the buses. A lot of these streets were built many, many years ago. There's, as we all know, the number of cars on the road have increased from many, many years ago, and getting down some of these streets are very difficult. To have a street that's paved the way it's supposed to, it's a great help, for safety for the kids as well, getting them from point A to point B. Busing is very large here on Long Island. We are responsible to get the kids to school, but we're also responsible for taking them on field trips, after-school activities, and, that could be at times a 7-day-a-week job. So it's encouraging to see that, that projects are in the works and trying to improve the roads of Long Island.
Okay.
Thank you very much for being here.
Real quick question for you. Do you see, because of the conditions of the roads, sometimes that you have to go over that, because of potholes or damage in the roads, it's caused more damage to your buses that require additional fixes?
Yes, just like the everyday commuter on the road going to and from work, yes, it definitely causes an increase in repairs. It also causes, at times, a longer route that normally, if we can't go down that street, then we have to reroute it. And I know the project on Merrick Road between, I think it's Meadowbrook and Wantor Avenue just started. So, to repair the Merrick Road area. That's causing delays, in the routes. But once it's done, the roads will be a lot safer, to drive on.
Well, I appreciate you being here,
Bill?
because we use, a lot of times when I talk about this issue, especially local infrastructure, like how many of us are putting our kids on a school bus every morning? That's why this task force is put together, to be proactive, to come up with solutions, because we don't want to be reactive to a disaster or a tragedy or something bad. So by you being here puts a face on the issue for school districts and that why we need to be proactive on this issue. So thank you very much for being here.
And the Belmore-Merrick area has got a lot of construction going on, just filling potholes and stuff, I know. Okay.
Can I ask you one question? So there was a proposal in the original state budget this year for stop arm cameras on school buses. And then as we got later in the session, there was a proposal that would basically have had that occur on a district-by-district basis, where the district would kind of be the one, implementing it and would basically be able to just kind of reimburse their costs. Do you have any thoughts on, it's something that I think many of us would like to see happen, because we hear, and I'm sure the law enforcement can talk about this a little as well, that it's a tremendous problem, people going around school buses, people maybe not fully understanding, even if they're on the other side of the road or whatever, going past. But do you have any thoughts on which way of going about that would be better, if it's administered by a larger government, say county, state, or if it's something that the district could do on their own, kind of an opt-in?
Yeah, no, I think it would be feasible and more effective if it came down from the state, that it was a state initiative, where it's good to have it statewide, so that no matter where you drive, the rules apply to everybody. And I think it would have more meaning behind it, more substance behind it, if it came down from the state.
The state statistics that came out recently, there's tens of thousands of these violations all over the state, all the time. People don't realize that, when you're going the other way, you still have to stop. And it's terrible, Sue. I hope we can do that.
I think a lot of it too is a lot of the drivers don't know the rules of the road, and, I think we all should, take, refresher courses, on it. It's, we participate every year in that. We have we subcontract our buses as well. I have also a small fleet of buses that I do inter-district. And again, we all participate in that every year. I'm part of the NIAP Association for Nassau County. And that's, it's a big discussion every year. So whatever you can do for that. We were hoping this last budget that it would have gotten through, but,
It'll be proposed again, I know, this year. Okay, thank you very much. Anybody else questions for Ralph? No. You want to introduce Justin? Justin from Oyster Bay, Justin McCaffrey.
Thank you. My name is Justin McCaffrey. I'm the Commissioner of Public Safety for the town of Oyster Bay. I wear another hat, though. I'm also a fire commissioner in Massapequa. I've been a 38-year member of Massapequa. Except I currently serve as the fire commissioner there. So there's a strong nexus, certainly, between safer roads and infrastructure with first responders, the firefighters, the EMTs, the police officers. We certainly, none of us have to be reminded of the tragedy upstate with the limousine where the 20 people died. And, while that investigation is going to take a while, I imagine somewhere in there is going to be some complaints about the engineering of the roads and things like that. So it certainly has a direct nexus, infrastructure, safety, and things like that, whether it be safer roads, transporting hazardous materials, just overall safety for the public with the safer roads. On a personal level, that I can speak to, I'll leave all the expertise about the road design to my coworker Rich and the supervisor. But as a first responder, I can tell you, going back to like Superstorm Sandy, we had a serious flooding problem on the South Shore in Massapequa. Massapequa is one of the largest fire districts in Nassau County. And that night of the storm, we responded to over 600 fire calls. Massapequa normally goes to about 3,000 the entire year. Just in that 18-hour period, we went to almost 600 calls. 14 homes burnt to the ground on the southern end of Massapequa down by the water. And a lot of that was due to our inability to get there because of flooding. One call that I got involved with was an elderly couple actually called. They were a senior couple. They were calling from standing on their bed in their bedroom, and the water had already filled up a good chunk of their first floor. They were standing on the bed, screaming for help, that they were trapped in their house, worried that they were going to be flooded. We didn't even have the ability to get fire trucks down there. That's how deep the flooding was. We sent an Army truck down there, which the fire department had, and the crews going to rescue the seniors actually had to abandon the fire truck. They actually had to stand on the roof of the Army truck as the water was raising up. They started calling for help. They ultimately wind up tying ropes around their waist, diving into the water, swimming to the highest ground that they could find. They eventually got to the senior couple. They wound up breaking into their house and were able to get to them. Tell you how bad the flooding was. The town even sent one of the town's payloaders to try to rescue the fire crew, and that got flooded. That stalled out and got flooded. So imagine how high the water was for an Army truck and a payloader to be flooded out. So, I know you can say, well, that was Sandy. It was a once in a lifetime thing, but the storms, like even a night like tonight, we'll have severe flooding down in Massapequa on some of our roads, and I think maybe one of the issues selfishly in the Massapequa part that maybe you could address would be helping us raise some of the roads. It's a serious problem. Even a storm like today there'll be 1 foot, 2 feet of water on our roadways. It really impacts the first responders getting down there in an emergency. So, if I was going to pick one topic tonight, that would be the one thing that comes to mind, I guess, because I lived through it the night of Sandy. But we need help in raising some of the roads down there. It's a problem down there.
You and our first responders face is sometimes, one of the things we heard even last night in Suffolk County was that sometimes that pedestrians just aren't, motorists aren't paying attention, and like they won't acknowledge, or there's a capacity issue because it's, tight from one side to the other, or you think it needs more education and enforcement, or is it a combination of all three? Or what could the state do to be more helpful to kind of help ease some of those burdens. I know you mentioned raising the roads is the one primary thing, but I was just kind of wondering what are some of the challenges you're seeing? Is it some motorists just aren't cognizant of emergency personnel coming and the capacity because it's, you're full from one side of to the other, or is it education and enforcement thing that we need to be a little bit better with?
Yeah, I think all the above. I think some better education, some enforcement. We have Sunrise Highway that runs through our district, which is a state road. We have some of the intersections are covered by traffic emitters, which essentially as an emergency vehicle responses gets nearby that intersection, it turns all the lights red in all directions, things like that. That's helpful to us. It turns the direction we're going, the fire truck would be green, everybody else would be red. That all involves, state grants and things like that to help us. That's an important life safety. Training, grants for training, training facilities, all, equipment, first responder equipment, rescue equipment, things like that would always be welcome. Better training opportunities. The state, runs a lot of training classes and stuff, but there could always be more, I think if most first responders would tell you that they would like to see that from the state too, some equipment grants and training opportunities.
Kevin, you got anything?
Really quick, I just kind of mentioned what Phil just said and Dave before. It seems like there's definitely a lack of awareness with people going on the school buses. And to Phil's point, is there a lack of awareness about the move over law for people moving over for not just first responders, but it could be highway workers. I volunteered in a fire department up in Putnam County for over 10 years and worked as an EMT. And I've been on calls where like a help truck driver got clipped because they were trying to help someone with a disabled vehicle. So it could be, part of it is it the congestion and there's a lack of a place to move over? Or is it, quite frankly, a lack of understanding or knowledge that you have to move over? Is there a need to look at the fine to maybe add some more teeth to it? Or really, I guess what you just said is really more all about the approach. Do you have anything else to add to that? I mean,
No, I think you summed it up pretty well. I think it's definitely education, though. That I think the officers will agree with me. I don't see a lot of people respecting the move over law and stuff like that, even when there's the opportunity to do so. I get it, sometimes you can't, but you can at least slow down if you can't move over. And I think they'll back me up on that's not happening so much. And I think maybe some better education on that, more public safety commercials, things like that, maybe could help out with that. Really stress it during driver ed and things like that.
well, I wanted to say thank you again. It's just 600 calls just in that one incident, right? How many hours did you say? 18 hours. 18 hours. So just the little fire department that I volunteered with, that's how many we had in a year. Right. So thank you.
Justin, are these all volunteer firefighters? Yes, all volunteer. I just want to say thank you again please convey our thanks to your members, because we talk about this a lot. Everyone talks about property taxes, and and I know FASI put out a study, if the services provided by our volunteers had to be paid services, it would cost an additional $3.2 billion annually in property taxes. So not only are our volunteers looking out for, the safety of the residents, but they're also, obviously looking out for the property taxpayers. So, our volunteers are really instrumental in our community. So thank you. Please extend our thanks to them. One thing you mentioned that I wanted to bring up that was mentioned at last night's meeting was that with the red light cameras, they said there was an example where, there's a red light camera on an intersection and you can't turn right on red. So no one ever turns right on red, but there's backed up 3 or 4 cars, but there's an ambulance trying to get by. The only way to go was to turn right on red. No one wanted to do it because they didn't want to get a ticket. And it seems like we should be able to figure out some common sense to some of that, hopefully in the future. But thank you again for your time.
Thank you very much. You have 2 people who see all of these aspects on a daily basis, and we're very happy to have them both from the 2nd Precinct in Nassau County, and that's Matt McCartan and Chris Lovelace. If you'd both step forward and take the seats.
Hi, good evening. How are you? I'm Officer Matt McCartan from the 2nd Precinct. I've been a police officer for 24 years, 4 years in New York City, and the rest of my time here in Nassau County in the 2nd Precinct.
And I'm Officer Chris Lovelace. All my time's been here in the 2nd Precinct. I'm 11 years on the Nassau County Police Department.
And the 2nd Precinct covers what communities?
Well, now that we are combined with formerly the 8th precinct, the 2nd precinct starts tip of the Southern State Parkway, everything north of the Southern State Parkway, all the way up to the water, Bayville. The furthest east, we cover to the Nassau-Suffolk border. The furthest west, we cover Locust Valley, Westbury, yes, Locust Valley, and the furthest west, southwest would be like the Hicksville area.
So you cross, your area crosses 4 or 5 major state parkways, too.
Yeah, tremendous area. Geographically, we certainly the biggest precinct in Nassau County, not necessarily the busiest, but geographically the biggest, and which also encompasses our village police departments as well.
What's your perspective, both of you?
Regarding,
Well, what do you think has to be done? You see it from a different point of view than the administrators and stuff like that, but you're out there every day and you see every type of thing and some of the very bad things like we just heard about upstate, but what do you think some of the recommendations that you could give us that we could take back to the state that could help you do your job a little better or help protect everybody out there?
well, one of the things we greatly appreciate from the state are the state grants that are offered, to conduct vehicle and traffic enforcement throughout the year. I mean, that's something that's a good tool for us to establish good driver behavior. We feel when we're on the road, one of the biggest things is, and obviously we can all agree in this room, is distracted driving. Everybody's doing everything else but driving, whether it's cell phone, text, putting on makeup. We've seen all kinds of stuff, and it's unbelievable in terms of the behavior that people have when they're driving.
Distracted driving kills and injures more people than DWI now.
Yes, sir. Yeah.
So you're saying more education on that, right?
Definitely more education, and of course, along with the vehicle and traffic enforcement, obviously, Long Island's become tremendously populated over the last 10 years, and we feel like we have to hit a lot of different spots in order to maintain some kind of good driving. There's certain behaviors along with the roads that obviously have to be corrected, like we spoke about tonight. That certainly would help us as police officers. I mean, we're very sensitive to some of the things that have happened in the last few years. We had 2 of our fellow colleagues that were killed on the Long Island Expressway as a result of not having enough space, and again, driver behavior, and just not paying attention. And along with several other officers that were critically hurt, and so it's something that a very disadvantage for us when we're approaching a vehicle to stop a vehicle and our backs turned to the traffic.
So your patrol area covers the Long Island Expressway, which is not covered by the state, as the northern and southern and Meadowbrook and Wandsworth parkways are, covered by the state patrol, state police. But your Long Island Expressway is Nassau County Police, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah, we also cover the 135, which is right. So, and we cover obviously the Long Island Expressway, and we also assist the state police on major accidents and road closures. I know they're very spread out in terms of their manpower. So if we can get to help somebody, or help a motorist, or help somebody in a critical crash, we assist right away.
Do you, when you come across a road repair that just happened, something not repaired yet, right away, and maybe it's a cause of an accident or a disabled vehicle or something like, do you have a way of reporting that? Like somebody, after a big storm, hits a major pothole, get a flat tire, break their wheel, whatever it is. Do you have a system to report that so that we can go, so that the word can get out to the highway department of whatever areas, whether it's state, county, or local, right away? Or is it, sometimes we hear about reports from drivers who said, I got damaged my car terribly because of the pothole, and I want reimbursement, but is there a way you guys can tell anybody, hey, this road's got a hazard, so that the word can get out faster?
Yes, we have we have rotary hazard forms that are prepared in duplicate within the police department. It's a police department form. And what the officers do, at a scene like that, or, a situation, we would fill that out, and then we would give it to our clerical, who would then disperse it to the appropriate agency, whether it was a state road, a county road, a town road, and then it would be dealt with, by the appropriate agency. In terms of something that's real hands-on, that's something that's critical at that particular point, then obviously we wouldn't leave the scene. We would stay there and set up our situation and make sure that until somebody comes out immediately, and then it would be addressed at that particular moment.
Do you have any recommendations when we're talking about infrastructure and transportation that you'd like to see happen?
Well, I mean, I think better communication in terms of notifying, when roads and different situations occur. I think to expedite the information and to get it more quickly to, let's just say, the state, and just so there aren't several different layers of, of means to get to an individual or an actual person on the phone, so we could, get to the root of the problem and address it, so we could, keep the flow of traffic going and make sure that we don't have these tie-ups, because of bottlenecking and different things of that situation when we have bad auto accidents at scenes and different things of that nature.
You also mean sooner notification of the police department when there's going to be a road closure the next day or something, so that you'll be aware that, on Merrick Road right now, they've just closed a whole portion in Belmore and Merrick, and it's, creating everybody to narrow down to one lane in that direction. Would you support or want a sooner notification that this is going to happen in the next couple of days?
I think that would certainly help us, and especially it would help the community. The job that Officer Lovelace, my partner, that we do is we have to deal with our civic groups and our civic leaders and all our contingent people within. So for us to get that information ourselves and then send that out through either an email or some kind of social media would greatly benefit the situation. I know people are still not going to be happy with some of the results, and they might not leave 15 minutes earlier from their house and that whole thing, but at least if we can get the information prior, that would help. And even so, in both ways. We like to have an opportunity to let you know, and then maybe you can put out it on an informed sign. Listen, we have some kind of police activity. This is what's going on. Things of that nature.
The topic that I was speaking about earlier, safety in and around the schools from, a pedestrian and vehicular standpoint. Can you guys give any thoughts on that in terms of, both in terms of speeding, in terms of passing school buses, discharging and pickup of children?
Yes, we do get a lot of those traffic complaints, and they do get addressed. Obviously, we take the complaints in, and then we either assign a post car or a special patrol car for that day when we have extra vehicle and traffic enforcement officers on the road, or the two of us that go out, and we hit those spots. And what we like to do is, we do them periodically in different spots, because, again, it creates a mindset for drivers. And the minute we start writing tickets in a certain place, everyone knows about it through email, through Facebook, and all these different other social media outlets. And I got to be honest with you, it's disappointing, because most of the people that we do stop and either warn or summons, a lot of the people live in that community, and it's sad. And a lot of the parents are doing it that go to the school. The kids go to the school. So it's disappointing in that way.
In fact, sometimes the people we pull over and ticket are the people that call up and complain.
We've had
That's
that.
true story, yeah.
Well, I was the one who called. Well,
The school zone speed restriction has a 10-mile cushion, and a lot of people I know, it says 20 miles an hour, and you're going through, especially when school is starting, you're going through a tough area where parents are trying to turn to get into the lot and all that, and yet people know that, well, you really can go up to 30. And that should probably be downgraded because it's very dangerous. And you get, school zone speeding is a big thing.
Well, just to, to rectify, your point was we had a situation up in Locust Valley where the speed limit was 35 and the cars were racing and going through that speed zone. So the village decided to lower the speed limit to try to get people to slow down at least a little bit more. And along with our vehicle and traffic enforcement, and there were some roadway issues up there, which I think are currently being addressed. We're hoping that we could alleviate some of the, some of the, the vehicle and traffic violations that are occurring up there, particularly speeding.
Okay.
Officer, just another comment or question regarding the distracted driving, which Mr. McDonough already kind of mentioned about the rising instances of distracted driving and the increasing accidents. Do you feel that law enforcement have the tools to be able to enforce distracted driving, specifically people texting? Like, how are you able to enforce that? Like, you actually witness someone having, driving with the phone in their hand, and do you feel like you have the tools to properly enforce that law? I mean, is there ways we can do it better? Because there are some proposals, but I just kind of want to see how does it work now?
Well, in terms of the actual law itself and the way we interpret it, the mere presumption of holding an electronic device is that you're actually using it. And, the idea is to create a mindset to have a hands-free device in the car. So in terms of us having an opportunity to enforce that, yeah, we do, because I got to be honest with you, ever since the, texting has been implemented many years back, we've had a tremendous amount of rear-end accidents that were, again, could be totally unavoidable. And, we just feel like that's one of the more critical distracted driving components with drivers. And the lesser of two evils might actually be being on the cell phone, at least the person's looking ahead as opposed to looking down and up. So, again, they're both wrong, but we're trying to get in front of that.
Yeah, I bring that up because there's actually some legislation that's been proposed in Albany. They call it the Textilizer Bill, or Evans Law, which is the son of Ben Lieberman, lives in Westchester County, just south of my district, who lost his son to someone that was driving while texting. And there's been a lot of challenges trying to access the phone records after a fatality to see if the person was actually, in fact, texting or using their mobile device. So this would be, the Textilizer is a type of equipment that people could use to see if they were using their mobile device at the time. But I know the governor's doing a study on it. There's some privacy concerns. Anytime someone touches a cell phone, obviously that's something we want to make sure we're not accessing data or anything like that. But if there's, more tools that we can offer law enforcement to help you do your job, I know that's something that, we want to consider. But that's why I was asking if it's impediments on, like, you have to be able to see them through the window, and, you may not see it, right? So, and if the accident's already occurred and you're responding, how do you really know if they were on their phone after you're cutting someone out of a car? I was the victim of a head-on collision with someone that was distracted. I don't know if they were using their phone. I don't know if they fell asleep. All I know is the person was going the wrong way and hit me at 55 miles an hour. So, luckily he survived, I survived, but no one knows unless you're going to go through the legal, obstacles of trying to access someone's personal cell phone data. So I was just curious if that's, the other thing is, like Mr. McDonough talked about the raising rates of accidents. I'm sure there's a lot more that may not even be reported.
Yes, sir.
It's
Definitely. I mean, getting to your point of, we might not even know if they're using their phone or not in the event of, critical accident, even one with yourself. We have to observe violations in order to write them, vehicle and traffic, with the exception of a few. But for the most part, if there was something that was, required more of a criminal investigation, we would definitely get those cell phone records and try to pinpoint the time of the accident and to when, the phone usage was actually used. I have to tell you, most of the cell phone companies are very responding to us getting, the records through a subpoena. I mean, if that's something that across the board could be, easily done, or maybe done more expeditiously, I mean, that would certainly help, but,
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. And Thank you for
Thank
what
you.
you do every day.
Bless you.
Really. You're out there protecting us. Thank you very much. Was there anybody else that wanted to speak before I ask the supervisor again? Okay, supervisor.
Thank you, Assemblyman. I'd like to thank each and every one of you, the chairs of the committee, and all the members in transportation. You have been very proactive. We're quite blessed to have you looking out for the needs of our municipalities and our residents. And to the Long Island members especially, thank you. You advocate for us each and every day. Without your voice, we in places like the town of Oyster Bay would be lost. The grants, the funding, and the proactive approach is appreciated, very professional, and makes a tremendous difference. So thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank my commissioners, our commissioners in the town of Oyster Bay, Commissioner Lenz of DPW and Highway and Sanitation and Sword and Engineering, and Commissioner McCaffrey with Public Safety. You do a yeoman's effort. It's very difficult as we cut back on the finances, understanding what our financial commitments are to our taxpayers, and continue to bring the highest level of services. Thank you so much to law enforcement. You make a difference each and every day, whether you're protecting the residents and those at our town board meetings, to the work you do in putting your lives and safety on the line. You're amazing heroes, and we appreciate you very, very much. Just a quick couple of points, if I may make, that hopefully will be helpful with your report. As you all know, experience is a mighty teacher. When I started in the Assembly, I looked a lot more like Assemblyman Byrne, far more than I do now. But over time, we start to learn about what our needs are. In the town of Oyster Bay, we have very specific needs. When I began in January of 2017, we had $760 million of capital debt. Our bond rating was junk bond status, making it very difficult to borrow with any level of efficiency. The refunding for state monies sometimes takes 2 years to get that money back. Sometimes in some rare circumstances, far more than that. So we have to bond to cover that time period, which eats up into the grant.
Yeah.
So a more streamlined process, which gets the revenue to the municipalities more quickly, is something that's appreciated, and this way the taxpayers can get a larger portion of their fair share of the monies. The reimbursements are critical. I also believe that there should be a pool of money set up for vehicles to maintain our roads, plow the snow, to take care of the repaving. A lot of it we're doing ourselves to save money now. We've changed the dynamic and the approach at which we spend on our roadways and the rehabilitation of our 730 miles of roads in the town of Oyster Bay. But to get the vehicles, very difficult to get state funding, member items, which you've all been absolutely wonderful with. In the portion of the town of Oyster Bay, we have 2 new members, one in the state senate, one in the assembly. The assembly member is from the majority. The state senator is from that same party. Town of Oyster Bay has not received $1 from either one of them, which, from my experience, that's part of the role of the member, to deliver for the taxpayers of that community. If there was a fund to help us with those vehicles that are paramount to the maintenance of our roads, that would be greatly appreciated. We need a minimum of 3 vacuum trucks. One of the ways to reduce the flooding condition, obviously raising roads, which is very, very expensive. It was pointed out to you about $1.3 million per mile to rehabilitate our roads with the drainage. That doesn't include engineering costs. It's upwards of $1.6 million per mile when you add in the engineering costs. A vac truck costs about $300,000. So I should say costs $300,000 this year. With each year that goes by, that cost is guaranteed to increase. Vacuuming out our drains is an important way to keep water off the roads, but this way it has someplace to go. As you know, brush and materials. Your experience with transportation has been long and fruitful, so you know that just a bit of debris gets in there and it begins to clog them very quickly. A $300,000 vac truck only lasts 7 years before it needs, on average, needs major repairs. The coarse grit and the fact that many of them are used, all of them at one point or another, are used in a saltwater environment, means it's constantly pumping salt water through that truck. If you think about a shop vac that's designed to draw water, is designed to draw fresh water. Once you start running salt water through that, it greatly impedes its longevity. So that truck will last us 7 years before needing repairs, and between 10 to 12 years, it's not financially prudent to repair them anymore. So there's, and that's just the vac trucks, and we need at least 3. There's the big 10-wheelers that are used for snow plowing, and that price jumps up to $500,000 per vehicle. So if we had a special fund just for roadway vehicles, that would be a tremendous help. The other item I wanted to point out to you is something that I had brought a number of years back, but hopefully we can revisit this. In our communication with the different villages and towns and municipalities in the Assembly District, one point that was brought, all South Shore, just like what you represent, Assemblyman, one of the big issues is that now when we're seeing more and more storm events, more and more high tide flooding events, they have all asked that you exempt from the tax cap the costs associated with storm and disaster recovery. A municipality can be doing a fabulous job to maintain its finances, to properly budget for their taxpayers and stay within the cap, but you just need one Irene or Sandy to come along, and that throws out off your capital budget and your operating budget, because there's all the costs associated with overtime, fuel costs, the list goes on, and that throws a budget out of whack and makes it near impossible to stay within the cap, especially for smaller municipalities. So legislation to exempt from the tax cap the costs associated with storm and disaster recovery would be a tremendous help.
Joel, on that subject with an exemption, one of the other ideas that came up is exemption for capital type of expenditures as well.
Tremendous, tremendous help. We can't underscore that enough. Now, as an executive, I see the other side of maintaining those budgets. It's very, very difficult. Those 2 magic words that you, thank God, have said over and over again, unfunded mandates, really killing us. Pension and health costs going up so much every year. We've got to make that up somehow. So when it comes to the road maintenance, that would be another big, big help. Since January of 2017 that I've been the executive of the town of Oyster Bay. It's America's 3rd largest township, but we have continued to be very prudent with our expenditures. We've brought our capital debt down $135 million in those 18 months. We have, when I came to the town, we had junk bond status. We've opened our books up to Wall Street, and we've increased our bond rating back to investment grade with more increases expected. We had to, in order to do this, we had to go an entire year with no capital expenditures at all, and then in the 2018 budget, where we cut taxes to get things back under control, we had very limited money for capital expenditures, and they've all gone to road maintenance. One thing I can tell you for sure, we've had capstones with the other supervisors in the towns, a summit, and every single one of us has the same complaint. The roads are in terrible shape because of the environmental conditions, more days at sub-zero temperature. Our residents expect their roads cleaned when the first snowflake accumulation happens, and as Commissioner Lenz, who is a professional engineer, licensed PE, will tell us through his vast experience, the more runs you take on a road, the less they last. Generally, roads are designed to last between 20 and 25 years. The average age of roads in the town of Oyster Bay is 40 years old. So we are in tremendous need of more of that capital road money, more money for repaving from a public safety standpoint, whether it's our law enforcement trying to get down those roads, trying to get people out, the fire trucks. By not raising the roads, there is an incredible amount of danger that we're putting the public in, especially in the low-lying areas on the north and south shores of the town of Oyster Bay. So these are just some of the issues. You know, it's really about the costs, overcoming the unfunded mandates, and getting that state money that is so tremendously needed for the rehabilitation of our roads, the infrastructure, and the ability to increase our drainage, and that is one of the most expensive issues that we face in the town. I thank you very, very much for your professionalism, for your actions, and for your efforts to go around the state and listen to the communities, listen to the municipalities. It really is a comfort to all of our residents to know that you're all on the job and advocating for us in Albany.
Let me ask you one opinion. You may remember that some years ago, or a few years back, there was a discussion of shared services, not what the governor talked about of sharing services, like when you buy something, you buy it with the county together. But I'm talking about in snow plowing. We have, you know, people in my community, in the Belmore Merrick area, will tell me, the plow just went by and he didn't even come down my street. And I said, well, it's a town street, you're on a county street, or it's the state. As opposed to making it, and it would take a while to arrange it, to making maps and grids and saying, okay, you guys take care of this. Now, I know some bigger plows are not going to be able to go in those streets, but still, you'd have people not getting passed by, and I think it would save money and time to have the town and the county, and perhaps the state, working together to draw up grids that, okay, we'll work out that deal, right? So a town plow is going to do that county street that, you know, I mean, you've got it right here. You've got county streets right next to town plow. They'll go right down the street there, and everybody on the side street says, I saw him go by 4 times. And also, he's plowing it up and blocking my road, right? I don't know if that would work. What do you think?
Assemblyman, you bring up a fantastic point. We really appreciate your knowledge and experience on these subjects. When you look at the grids, we have, 16 villages in the town of Oyster Bay,
Yep.
crisscross a maze of state, county, town,
Village, yeah.
roads, as well as private roads, especially in our North Shore communities. So that hodgepodge creates a lot of complication. We've already worked diligently to save money by the consolidation of services under the plan that you previously referenced. Of all the municipalities on Long Island, of all the towns, with the exception of the 2 counties, town of Oyster Bay was #1 in the largest savings brought of any municipality. We share our sand and salt purchases with all of the villages. We have set up multiple locations throughout our town so that they can access that sand and salt without having to go a very far distance for their village, because fuel costs, as we all know, are exceptionally expensive, and the overtime to keep the workers in those vehicles is also a problem that we deal with each and every day. The other aspect, we share fuel now. They make their fuel purchases from the town's depot, and that's a savings that we share, and by buying in a larger bulk, there's a savings per gallon. We have also increased our purchasing savings by working on major purchases with the other municipalities. But I think that's an excellent assistance. There's another component here that perhaps you could think about in your report. There is new routing software that bigger municipalities, cities, and towns and counties are utilizing. But of course, the licensing is very, very expensive. What would you estimate on the Route Smart software license cost?
It's about $200,000.
Okay, about $200,000. This is another area. It's a one-shot price, and then we've got the Route Smart software. It helps our professionals to create routes that are more efficient, saves fuel, saves time. We can get more passes in the same amount of time, and it would be a big help to us to have the money set up for the purchase of that software. We run it out of our war room up on the Long Island Expressway, which is where we manage all of our storms and our emergency disaster recovery from. So these are just some of the areas which would be tremendous help, but your suggestion would be greatly appreciated. Again, we appreciate all of your years of experience, and especially your commitment. Our residents are exceptionally lucky to have you all at the helm.
Well, thank you for that promo. That's very nice of you, Joe. Thank you for what you're doing. You've succeeded very well in your first year and a half, or almost two now, right?
Well, I can say I miss you all, but I
Well-
don't miss that drive.
No, neither will any of us. Thank you, everybody,
So thumbs up for more chips,
for
Joe?
coming out
Please, yes.
and giving us some very good information.
Just one more time, anybody
Oh, I'm
else
sorry.
might want to say anything?
I asked them.
You sure? I know we did, just want to make sure no one wanted to say anything. All right. Yeah, good.
Dinner will now be served in the other room, if you go out the back door, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you, officers, thank you, everybody else. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
very helpful.